Welcome back to Grim Advice with Gretta Myers. You've entered the grimoire. Let's turn a new page together. Alright, today we've got the 7 ravens. There was once a man who had 7 sons, and still he had no daughter, and however much he wished for one. At length his wife again gave him hope of a child, and when it came into the world it was a girl. The joy was great, but the child was sickly and small, and had to be privately baptized on account of its weakness. The father sent one of the boys in haste to the spring to fetch water for the baptism. The other 6 went with him, and as each of them wanted to be first to fill it, the jug fell into the well. There they stood and did not know what to do, and none of them dared to go home. As they still did not return, the father grew impatient and said, "They have certainly forgotten it for some game, the wicked boys." He became afraid that the girl would have to die without being baptized, and in his anger cried, "I wish for the boys were all turned into ravens." Hardly was the word spoken before he heard a whirring of wings over his head in the air, looked up and saw 7 coal-black ravens flying away. The parents could not recall the curse, and however sad they were at the loss of their 7 sons, they still, to some extent, comforted themselves with their dear little daughter, who soon grew strong and every day became more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had had brothers, for her parents were careful not to mention them before her. But one day she accidentally heard some people saying to herself that the girl was certainly beautiful, but that in reality she was to blame for the misfortune which had befallen her 7 brothers. Then she was much troubled and went to her father and mother and asked if it was true that she had had 7 brothers and what had become of them. The parents now dared keep the secret no longer, but said that what had befallen her brothers was the will of heaven and that her birth was not to blame. But the maiden took it to heart daily and thought she must save her 7 brothers. She had no rest or peace until she set out secretly and went forth into the wide world to find her brothers and set them free, let it cost what it might. She took nothing with her but a little ring belonging to her parents as a keepsake, a loaf of bread against hunger, and a little pitcher of water against thirst, and a little chair as a provision against weariness. And now she went continually onwards, far, far to the very end of the world. Then she came to the sun, but it was too hot and terrible, and devoured little children. Hastily she ran away and ran to the moon, but it was far too cold, and also awful and malicious. And when it saw the child, it said, I smell the flesh of men." At this she ran swiftly away and came to the stars, which were kind and good to her, and each of them sat on its own particular little chair. But the morning star arose and gave her the drumstick of a chicken, and said, "If you have not that drumstick, you cannot open the glass mountain, and in the glass mountain are your brothers." The maiden took the drumstick, wrapped it carefully in a cloth, and went onwards again until she came to the glass mountain. The door was shut, and she thought she would take out the drumstick. But when she undid the cloth, it was empty, and she had lost the good star's present. What was she now to do? She wished to rescue her brothers, and had no key to the glass mountain. The good sister took a knife, cut off one of her little fingers, put it in the door, and succeeded in opening it. When she had gone inside, a little dwarf came to meet her, who said, "My child, what are you looking for?" "I am looking for my brothers, the 7 ravens," she replied. The dwarf said, "The Lord Ravens are not at home, but if you will wait here until they come, step in." Thereupon the little dwarf carried the ravens' dinner, and on 7 little plates, and in 7 little glasses, and the little sister ate a morsel from each plate, and from each little glass she took a sip. But in the last little glass she dropped the ring, which she had brought away with her. Suddenly she heard a whirring of wings and a rushing through the air, and then the little dwarf said, "Now the Lord Ravens are flying home." When they came and wanted to eat and drink and looked for their little plates and glasses, then said one after the other, "Who has eaten something from my plate? Who has drunk out of my little glass?" It was a human mouth. And when the 7th came to the bottom of the glass, the ring rolled against his mouth. Then he looked at it and saw it was a ring belonging to his father and mother, and said, "God grant that our sister may be here, and then we shall be free." When the maiden, who was standing behind the door watching, heard that wish, she came forward, and at this all the ravens were restored to their human form again, and they embraced and kissed each other and went joyfully home. First off, it's like very smart that she takes water, bread, and a chair. She knows her needs, and she goes out and she meets them, and that's awesome. Second of all, I'm sorry. The sun and the moon eating children. Eating children? I really don't know where that came from. I can't explain that to you, I'm sorry. But, that's a thing in this story. Secondly, we saw very quickly how, like, the man had, it's understandable why he was upset. The father, why he's upset with the sons, because the girl may die without being baptized, but she might die. So that's urgency on his part. So you understand why he's upset and why he's angry. But that doesn't, as we see, he immediately regrets the second that his curse turns true and the boys are turned into birds. Which, this isn't the first time that we've encountered boys being turned into birds. That's not the first time we've encountered that. So I'm not really sure of my analysis of that. I will get back to all of us later on that. About that trope sometime in the future. Maybe I'll just analyze basic tropes. I don't know. But anyways, he immediately regrets. He sees the boys fly off as 7 ravens and he wants to take it back immediately. The mom wants to take it back. They want to take it back so badly. And they can't. So just remember that everything said in anger can't be taken back. Certainly, you can work to change it, and I mean, if someone has said something to you in anger once or twice, then certainly work with that person on fixing what has been wrong. However, if someone that's a problem that someone tends to have is saying things quickly and maliciously in anger, then you might need to reevaluate how much time you're spending with that person, because that can be very damaging to the soul. And it's important to note that the parents didn't immediately just wallow in misery and pity and say, oh, if I could but have changed this situation. No, they moved on. Granted, they probably could have looked for their children, who are now birds. But they also were like, okay, we also have this daughter we need to take care of, and we have her, and that's a good thing. So there are tragedies that happen in life, and they suck. They really do. They're really bad, and it's hard. They're really hard, and there are going to be other things in life that are just as important or more important than whatever you might have lost. Does it take the hurt away of what you've lost? Absolutely not. But just because you've lost something does not mean that you can't, like, that you can just stop living. I mean, certainly, it might feel like that's all you can do for a while, but eventually, it's okay to get back up again and do other things and find new meaning in life, is what I'm trying to say. Finally, I want to touch on the girl's very radical decision at the end. I mean, okay, she cuts off her finger, right? Because she lost the drumstick. Apparently, the glass mount needed a key of bone. I don't know why. Personally, I really don't. I also don't know why she can't just keep her finger on and do that. I don't know why. But here we go. One, it's it just goes to show how important family is to the Grimm brothers, that they, time and time again, people make extreme sacrifices for their families, to get their families back from terrible situations. And honestly, it's very admirable and very interesting. We could all take a lesson from that. How much are we willing to go to let go to save someone we really love and care about? I mean, honestly, during this pandemic, that is the question. It's a hard one, honestly, but I want to touch on the birds get turned back into boys, and they go off and they live happily ever after, or whatever. Yeah, they live happily ever after together, and they go to home, and it's implied that the parents will accept them all again joyfully, and everything just works out fine from that point. However, it does not explicitly say that she gets her finger back. And I think that's important to recognize that for certain people we love and certain things that we like, we're gonna have to make sacrifices that we might not ever get that back. Maybe it's time that we choose to spend away from someone or with someone. Maybe it's choosing not to say certain things around people because you know that that person doesn't appreciate it. Or choosing to let go of certain flaws or character traits because you really love someone and you know it's hurting them. So you want to change yourself for the better so that you can feel better around them, feel proud. Maybe it's sleep, that we give up time to spend with a newborn child or a sick friend or a grandparent. Or maybe it's a hobby that we give up because, or a job we give up because it takes us away from the people and places we care about. And honestly, that's okay. It's okay to make sacrifices. I think it really is just important to recognize you might not get that thing back. In Happily Ever Afters, it's all the time insinuated that everything is fixed and everything went back to normal and is perfect. Sometimes it's not, though. Especially in real life, sometimes things are not 100% okay and fine after we go through some hard things. And we become changed in ways that you can't come back from. So you have to move on from rather than trying to go back to. Because if you go through crazy hard things, your own personal fairy tale, you'll get that happily ever after. You will. You just have to, it needs to be accepted that it might not be exactly the same. In fact, it won't. It won't be exactly the same as it was before. And that's okay. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. But it's going to be worth it, and it's going to be so much better if you accept. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking from experience. I've been through a fairy tale or two of my own. And the faster you accept that this is the new story. This is your new chapter. This is what's going on now. And that you need to figure out how to take these things that have changed about you and go forward with them in a good way. That's something you needed. If you do that, the sooner you can do that, the better. Granted, it's hard. I'm not saying it's not. Honestly. But it is something that has to be done. Wherever you're at right now is valid. And you can start trying to accept and move on that this is the new chapter. This is what's going on now. Instead of trying to go back to the way things were, because you can't. Certainly, there are some things that are going to remain the same, whatever fairy tale you went through. And there are things that aren't. So, you gotta figure out what that new normal looks like. And remember, wherever you're at right now is valid. It might suck, and it might be hard, but it's valid. You can spend a whole lifetime beating yourself up for not doing something, doing too much, doing everything, doing nothing. You can spend a whole lifetime beating yourself up for that. And honestly, that's a whole lifetime where you could have just been. Just accepted where you were in the moment and just been. And been okay with it. And using that okay feeling as a stepping stone into I can now do something better. Because beating yourself up is like taking that stepping stone and chiseling away at it until you're sitting in the middle of a river with cold feet. Alright, so this has been Grim Advice with Gretta Myers. Thank you for joining us for this happily ever after, or not so happily ever after. That's up for you to decide. For me, it was a good ending. Either way, this is the end for this episode. So, tune in later and we can turn a new page together.